Every woman needs to take that universal path to find self-worth, a voice, and a cherished life. That path is the heroine's journey, the roadmap to an amazing adventure that women travel to discover their true selves. The heroine's journey is not about getting on your superpowers and going out to fight the lions, tigers, and bears of the outside world with your might. That would be the hero's journey. This woman's journey is the internal journey that a woman takes to grow her courage and strength and travel to her best life.
I'm so excited. My book is now live on Amazon. It's been a 10-year project for me so that I can bring this information to you because it's been so valuable to me. If you'll go to Amazon, look for The Heroine's Journey, Joan Perry, you'll find the book. $4.99 for you for just a limited time. Go get it now. Hi, Erin.
Hey, Joan. How you doing today?
I've just been tickled all week long because our conversation was so interesting last week when we talked about identity and where does a woman get her identity. That as you and I've talked through the week, we're like, hey, there's just more to talk about on this subject.
We just couldn't let it go.
We could not. It was like we opened the can and we just could not close the genie back in once it was open. And I think it's because when have you ever had these kind of conversations with your girlfriends or even your mother or someone where you said, hey, what's my identity and where did I get it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. And that I have to admit, that is not a conversation topic that usually comes up when I'm talking with any of those groups of people.
No, no, it was such a telling conversation last week. And by the way, if you're listening to us this week and you didn't hear that conversation, please go back and listen to last week's podcast. We're just going to expand upon it a little bit this week as we talk about some of the different cultural and societal and beliefs things that drive the identity that we choose for ourselves. And we should note here at the top of this conversation that identity is so important because identity determines what you do. It's directly related to the big questions we ask in life, and we'll get to that too. So, it's just how could I be this old and not have even considered this along the way? I'm blown away.
You just sort of, and I have to admit, I'm the same way. Like you just sort of go along
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let people, culture, society, jobs, whatever, kind of tell you, I guess, what your identity is, who you
Yeah.
are.
For instance, if we took culture, the culture tells me lots of things about my identity. If what I'm wearing is not new, it's not good. That I should, have plenty of makeup and all the things that make me glamorous, because that's what the women's magazines tell me. That I'm never good enough is one of the identity things that it tries to stick on me. And that I should always have a credit card in my wallet.
With money to spend.
Yes, yes. Uh-huh. And that I somehow shouldn't think that money is important. Well, because there's supposed to be a guy in my life for that. but, but that was a quick example of the culture and what the culture starts to tell you about your identity. And as we're saying right now, whoever stops to think, is that me?
Yeah. I know I had a big moment this week, and we were talking about this earlier, but where I don't know why it just hit me this week, but I was thinking about the cultural expectations around like marriage or a wedding specifically, actually,
Mm-hmm.
where your father, if you're a woman, your father gives you away, and that is actually the language we use, gives you away to your husband. And they basically transfer ownership.
Or something like that. It's never really been defined.
Yeah.
But you certainly go from under the umbrella, let's call it, of a father, and then you're handed off traditionally to the umbrella or the person who has the most say, which then becomes your husband.
Yeah. It's,
And isn't it confusing if it's like your mother, where she got handed off in that process a couple of times?
yeah. Yeah. And what's so also so fascinating to me about that when I stopped to really think about it was like that whole process, that whole tradition
Uh-huh, tradition.
is so ingrained in our culture at this point that
Mm-hmm.
that is like, I mean, dare I say it, every little girl's dream is to have her father at her wedding give her away type
Uh-huh,
of thing. It's, I mean, it's probably not every, but
uh-huh.
enough.
Enough, yeah. And we're not saying that marriage or having a man in your life or other things are bad. What we're saying here is, how do we get our own identity in the process of the way culture is currently working? And another part of that is that you and I were saying this week is that we get handed down our father's last name always.
Yeah.
So our identity comes through the male lineage of our father. And then what about our mother?
Yeah. It's, and I guess this goes again culturally, societally. It happens, and I the example or the thought that comes up into my mind is, I mean, this is crazy, but go back to like the Vikings, like Leif Erikson. He was the son of Eric.
Yeah.
That's how he
Uh-huh.
got his name.
Right. Right. Whereas we essentially get, I'm going to even call it, divided from the heritage of our mother. Now, some of us get our mother's last name as our middle name.
Yeah.
That did not happen in my case.
Mm-hmm.
In
Not in
my
my case
case,
either.
I just got my father's last name. So as I look at my family heritage, I look at my family heritage as coming down distinctly through my father.
Mm-hmm. And now that you reflect on that,
Uh-huh.
how how would you want to change things, or how does that make you feel in terms of like your identity as a person? Because you have always been Joan Perry.
Right. I've always been Joan Perry, which is my maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
I never changed it. Um, so I, I had some funny experiences around that, where my first mother-in-law certainly did not agree that I didn't change my name. In fact, she was very insulted about it. Um, and we're not saying here, again, I just want to emphasize this point so clearly. We're not saying that cultural or society or, how we're named is wrong by any means. We're just acknowledging that this is the way that it happens, that our point of view does get skewed to who we are in terms of the lineage and um, the male identification that we're just part of in our culture.
Yeah, we've lost the matri, as you said before, we've lost the matrilineal line. We've lost the women in history of our and in our history specifically.
Uh-huh. And I think one thing that leads us to is that I looked to my father as a legend and not necessarily my mother. So then when you and I ask the question, who are heroines? Where are they? What have they done? It's kind of no wonder that we can't come up with any.
Yeah. Well, and you think about the I was literally on, I guess, Instagram or whatever, and there was a little clip, and the clip was all about women in history who have invented things,
Uh-huh.
whose husbands, because of the time and the place, whose husbands essentially got credit for it. And so they've essentially been erased
Uh-huh.
until maybe now.
Uh-huh. And I think that is the point, is that women are, it's called history for a reason. It's not called herstory. There is a reason that women have been erased out of history, because it's not herstory.
Yeah. But how can we reclaim that? Now that our eyes are open,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
how do we reclaim it?
I think that's the essential question, because you asked an interesting one the other day. You said, we were talking about our mothers, and we were talking about um, heroines, which we so often do. And we were saying, did they realize that they were leaving us a legacy? That we looked to them to know who to be and how to be? Or did they just think they were erased from history, so they didn't have that much impact on us?
I would almost pose a third option too, that they didn't even think about it.
I think that's right. Yeah, but then does that mean they didn't think about playing an essential role in society? That essential role being a heroine or a legacy for those who came behind them, for mentoring, and for thinking that their contributions could be really noteworthy.
Yeah. No. And that's I think the good thing about the conversation we're having right now, but also the conversation that I see happening around, is that we're starting to talk about this, about leaving a legacy, about um, what are you doing? How are you choosing your own identity? How are you leaving a legacy? How are you making a space for yourself
Exactly.
in all the noise that is out there?
Yeah, because being human, we can't deny that we come here and we start to ask big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do?
And it feels like that is, I mean, that is, dare I say it, that is the heroine's journey.
Yes, that's
each
true.
each of those questions, you go through each of the steps, but each of those questions have a step, have a platform in creating your own heroine's journey, but obviously the heroine's journey overall.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And if we don't start with what's my identity, how can we ask those questions?
Yeah, because
How
if you
can I
don't have,
ask who am I if my identity is completely given to me by the culture, by somebody else, by somebody else's opinion?
well,
How
but
can I
also,
ask that question?
well, I think also though, because each person is so unique, each person has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own interests, the things that light them up.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what that is for you, how can you light up your corner of the world?
Exactly. You can't. We're saying the same thing, which is it has to start with us. And while we live in a place, in a culture, in a world that doesn't necessarily ask us what our identity is, or did we choose it, or more importantly, encourage us to choose it, nevertheless, the heroine and the heroine's journey has to start at that point.
How do they start there?
Good question. Good question. I think the first start is just the conversation that you and I are having, where we admitted, as talented women right on the front end, that I've never even thought about this before. Oh my gosh. Let's start with that awakening. Hey, exciting. Look at the screen. The book, The Heroine's Journey, The Art of Becoming the Heroine of Your Own Life, is now up. You can download it as an ebook. I got something really special for you too. The ebook is at 99 cents for the next 2 weeks. It's a special offer to our inner circle. Those of you who are listening to the great journey that we're talking about on our podcast every week. The book takes you into the understanding of the heroine's journey and your journey. And once you've read the book, we'd love for you to come back and tell us about how the heroine's journey is working out for you. Please write us a review. In the meantime, The Heroine's Journey on Amazon for 99 cents for you for just a limited time. Go get it now. And then
Yeah.
secondly, I think it's conversations with other women like you and I, because as we've had these conversations, it's been eye-opening and both of us are like, what? How did I choose that that's part of who I am? Where did that come from? So you start to question it.
Yeah.
Do I have an identity? What is it? And where did it come from?
Do I like it?
Do I like it? Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes think of it kind of like if you think of a big jigsaw puzzle spread out all over the table. Okay. We get these individual pieces that are related to our identity that we have on the table, and we start to put the pieces together. And those pieces start to form a picture of who we are. I said last week, my identity now includes that I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a piece of the puzzle for me. When you look at the whole puzzle spread out over the table, what's striking is that sometimes you look at the pieces you put together and you think, but wait a minute, that's not the whole picture. Look, there's a big hole over here. There's some pieces missing. And then you look at other parts and you go, oh, well, there are maybe some pieces on the floor that I have to pick up. Or maybe I have to go and ask for other people to help me with those pieces. And then the worst part of it all is maybe there's some pieces of that puzzle that you just don't even want. And you're like, this doesn't belong to my puzzle. It might belong to somebody else's puzzle over there, but it's not part of my puzzle.
But how do you, because I feel like all of us have those type of pieces, those last type of pieces that you're talking about, where you look at them and you're like, that's not me, or this doesn't belong anymore. I don't want these anymore. How do you move on from that? Or how do you reshape them into something that now fits who you are and who you want to be?
I think, first of all, it's looking at the whole picture at that point and saying, because here's the truth of it. We have one life to live and it's short. Yeah. It's short, and if you just go along and screw around with it each day and it's not turning into the life that you want to live, then I'm sad for that. Really sad. So I think the first part of it, as we were saying, is just its recognition. And the second part of it is I think it's to start to look at this question of what's my identity from the inside and not the outside.
Go into that a little bit more.
Do you really care what someone else thinks about you? Do you really care what the culture is telling you should be? Do you really care what a group of people have to say about you? Do you really care that you failed at something. Maybe that's where you just go, one more thing that I learned doesn't work. I'm going to go on.
Yeah.
So I think it's really having that internal focus where you choose your identity to be something that supports your self-worth. Oh, I tried that, it didn't work. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means, like, I think Colonel Sanders tried to sell his recipe and he finally found someone on the 99th try.
I feel like that also, that like the story that comes into my brain is Edison trying to figure out how to make a light bulb.
Yeah.
And he had 1,000 tries, or he had whatever, but his philosophy seemed to be, oh, I've now found one more thing that doesn't do it.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that I won't find the thing that will, but I've eliminated this next thing, and now I can move on.
Right. Where I think that there's a lot of pressure on women to not have a good sense of identity.
Yeah.
And that it's our own internal job to build that identity.
Well, I guess to go back to what you just said, nobody's going to do it for you.
I wish somebody would, you know? And I wish all the stars lined up, which meant you're beautiful, you're rich, you're educated, everybody likes you all the time. All those things that we might say make the perfect identity.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the truth of it is we live in a world where most of us don't think that we're completely formed.
Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, there's so much that says to us, I need to be beautiful, I need to be rich, I need to be educated, I need to be that's a false reality. The true reality for us is, what gifts do I have that I can use to produce who and what I am? So, for instance, I didn't see myself as a writer, and people told me I wasn't a writer. But by actually producing and practicing that craft, I became who I wanted to be.
What got you over, like when you went to write A Girl Needs Cash,
Uh-huh.
what got you over the bump of everybody's telling me that I'm not, I don't necessarily believe that I am, but I'm going to do this thing?
I think that it was a couple of things. One is there were a couple of people in my life who supported me. I think support from which is why you need to circle yourself with people who do support you. Because those who love you, if you say to them, this is really important to me, those people who love you don't have judgment, they have support. So I think the first thing was that there are a couple of people who did support me. I think, secondly, from looking at it from the inside instead of the outside, all the judgment, from the inside, there was a glimmering in me that said, this is right. This is true. This is a path maybe I should just go down. And the third one, but this is a big thing, is that a heroine wants to do something legendary. I think that's the part that if I could go back and talk to my mother again, I would talk to her about that.
About it being okay to be legendary, or
and how did she want to show me that? Now, my mother, I had two amazing parents. My mother was an amazing woman who was very, very accomplished. what I always felt as a child is I wanted my mother's accomplishments to shine brighter. There wasn't room in the house that I grew up in for my father's accomplishments to shine really bright and my mother's accomplishments to shine really bright. That was always my wish as a child because I wanted my mother's accomplishments to be recognized, um, to be honored, to be acknowledged. And I think that's some part of where we need to push in the heroine.
Yeah.
And we see it all the time because you and I've talked about this. Do they build statues to women?
Not generally.
Not generally. But the heroine's journey is about women coming from their own gifts, producing something legendary, and being proud of it.
And I think that last piece, I mean, it's one thing to build something legendary, and legendary has so many different definitions and it's so unique to you. But there's also then the allowing yourself to be proud of it, allowing yourself to say, I did that.
Uh-huh.
That was something that I did. I cared and I did it.
Yes, because that's when it's firmly planted in your identity. You
Yeah.
don't want to dismiss it at that point because then you're dismissing building your own identity.
Yeah. And honestly, to achieve the legendary, again, in whatever form that it takes for you, to achieve the legendary takes a lot of hard work. It
Uh-huh.
takes a lot of struggle and probably doubt,
Uh-huh.
but pushing through that doubt, believing that the end is worthy of the effort.
Of the effort. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. And you can choose to be, we're calling it legendary right now, or let's call it, you can choose to build your identity in any walk of life. Maybe you're the best nurse. Maybe you raised the best family. Maybe you have, as I have, written a book. Maybe you are the best athlete. Um, those choices, that's not what's important. What's important is your own conviction that you have put in, as you're saying, the work, the effort, and reached uh, reached a point where you're happy with it.
Yeah. Well, and it's also something that to me, and this again, that this is very unique to me, or specific to me, is you've created something that lasts beyond you,
Yes, right, right,
you
right.
know?
And I think I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to say that as heroines, we want to claim the right to create something that lasts beyond us. When we've contrasted the hero and the heroine, the hero does create something legendary. He does have a name. They do build a statue to him, and he is known for it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
That we want the same right.
Yeah. It seems so simple when you say it like that.
Right. But it hasn't been so, and perhaps it's because the lineage of the father is handed down to us. And I'm really asking for the lineage of the mother to be handed down to us too.
Yeah.
Who do we become as women?
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I love about having this conversation with you now at this stage in my life, this stage in your life, is it it goes to the fact that it's never too late
Uh-huh.
to think about these things, to change, make changes, make choices,
Uh-huh.
make different choices,
Uh-huh.
um, that lead you in a different direction, a new direction, because
Uh-huh.
you are the master or the mistress of your own
being.
destiny. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's time to get your journal out and sit down with it and say to yourself, what is my identity? We talk very clearly in the heroine's journey about the identity of being a heroine versus a victim,
Yeah.
because from victim, you can't get much done in life.
Life is happening to you.
To you. Yes, but the heroine knows that life is happening for you. Even if something comes along that upsets your apple cart and it seems like it's terrible and it's horrible. For me, that was my first divorce. I was like, this is the most horrible thing that can happen. My life is all upset. It's going to be ruined from here on out. How did I make such a mistake? I was a smart woman. What did I do? I mean, I beat up my identity terribly.
Yeah.
Just beat it with a whip, you know? But as I got further out and I could look back on it, I actually could see that, hey, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me in life because I really needed to grow beyond that. My identity needed to take on new shape and form, and it was limited where I was. And while I certainly don't believe in divorce because we all grew up with the myth of happily ever after, and you'd like to think that there was somebody who spent their whole life with you and that, you had that grounding and support. The reality that we live in is sometimes it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And as I looked back, I decided it was one of the best things that could have possibly happened to me. So in that process, I changed my viewpoint of my identity from being a victim that had happened to me to being a heroine that had happened for me.
How long did it take you to make that shift?
The first time around, it took me way too long. I sat in the corner sucking my thumb, being, oh, woe is me. My sister used to have a philosophy that if you need to be the victim, close all the shutters, be really miserable, stamp your feet, yell, scream, have a hot bath, and do it for 2 days. Because as I began to see that life works for me instead of against me, I began to move through it faster. And that's the whole
Yeah.
process of choosing my identity.
Yeah. What I also love about that, though, is it's not to say that when the thing happens, like it can knock you off your feet.
Absolutely.
And it's okay that it knocked you off your feet. And it's okay to have a moment and just like cry and scream and
Yeah.
suck your thumb in a corner.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that.
Uh-huh.
But you also need to get back to yourself
Uh-huh.
and to the foundation of yourself that says, okay, we've done
Uh-huh.
that thing and now let's move forward. Let's find out what is on the path, the next path, that I'm not going to find if I just continue to sit here.
Uh-huh. Because we're talking again about that internal identity. I had to come to grips with, which wasn't all that easy. I had to come to grips with, I have courage. That's part of my identity. I have strength. That's part of my identity. I had to come to grips with, I'm a heroine. I had to come to grips with, well, damn, it doesn't all work out the way I want it to work out, even though I want it.
Yeah. Well, when you say this is an interesting phrase that you just used, you said, I had to come to grips with. To me, that means that almost a little bit you were fighting and screaming against finding your strength and finding your courage and that kind of stuff. Was that kind of really how it was?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because um, identity and how you see yourself so often is driven by the circumstances of our lives. And
Yes.
yet the heroine is able to separate the circumstances of her lives with who she truly is. And what I just said is a big thing, because what I just said is it's easy to define ourselves, to create our identity by the circumstances of our lives. The skill of being a heroine is to say, oh, no, 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 you don't know who I am. Just watch.
Yeah.
Because there's much more in me that wants to take flight.
I have so much more, I guess, to echo your words, so much more to give, so much more to be
Uh-huh.
than what you see right now.
Uh-huh. And that's why when I go back to my mother and I say, I look to my mother for my identity, I wanted to look to her to see that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted her to show me that she wasn't limited by her circumstances. I wanted her to show me that she could accomplish. I always say the happiest day of my life was the day she went to work. That her gifts were in that, and she did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
But I don't think as women, we really understand that there are other people looking to us for that.
Yeah. And it's
And
not, and it's not just women either. It's both men and women, sons and daughters,
uh-huh,
boys and girls, however you want to define it. I think when people see somebody in their heroine, in their light,
uh-huh.
shining, like it's mesmerizing.
It is. It truly is. And I needed that example to go to when life got really, really, really tough.
It's always going to get tough. There's always going to be a tough
Wasn't that
coming.
true? Yeah. Yeah. Because we know that's part of the heroine's journey now. And so we don't reject it like there's something wrong with us. We
Yeah.
accept it, that it's part of refining who we are, our soul, our being, or whatever. It's part of bringing out our talents and our skills and our courage and our strength. It's all of that.
I love framing it as this challenge, this difficulty, something that is tough, something that is hard, is an opportunity to shine the light inside to see like how you respond to the thing, but also what the thing brings out in you.
Uh-huh. And not to look at the outside and the circumstances, because identity is an inside job.
There's the quote of the episode. Identity is an inside job.
And as you're pointing out, like you said before, it's probably an ongoing job through our whole life.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how old you are or what. We're always refining who we are and our identity to our bigger, glorious selves, because none of us see ourselves as magnificent as we truly are.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
that, what you just said about we're always refining, I think when I hear you say that, I get excitement inside because I'm like, yeah, like I'm going to keep learning about myself. I'm going to keep, as you say, refining like who I want to be and what I want to leave as a, going back to our word, legacy.
Mhm.
Um, but also how I want to show up both for myself, but also for my people.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm going to tell a kind of a sad story here, and that's that someone that I really admired just died very suddenly. A person who gave magnificently to the people around him. He was gracious, he was kind, he was humble. But you know what? His example has left me with such a legacy that I've thought more about who he is now when he's not here than I did when he was here.
Yeah. I think we take things for granted a lot, which is why the tough or the sudden passings of people are a great time to reflect.
Right.
I wish we had reflected a little earlier so we could have told that person or whatever that they were so special and how important they were to us. But the reflection, I feel like, leaves a ripple in the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point of our conversation today is to really stop for a moment, as you and I've done for the past week, and say, what is my identity and where am I getting it? And what pieces are composing the puzzle that I have that's my own identity? And are there some pieces that I want to keep, change, adjust?
And that the identity that you have, when you actually stop and think about it, that identity is not stagnant. It's not like this is all it's ever going to be. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly evolving with you as you live.
Sometimes I wake up and I play this game with myself. I'll wake up and maybe I'll be in a funky mood, and then I'll say to myself, oh, no, I'm a happy person. That is my identity. I'm a happy person. And I want to take a moment to adjust that, because my whole day is going to be changed by what identity I start my day with.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Because the very first question is, and we're so incredibly human that we can't avoid this, is who am I? And we always say on the heroine's journey that the heroine's journey calls you to ask these big questions.
And a lot of times when it calls you is in those darkest, toughest moments.
Exactly. And those are the moments when I want to turn around, swim right back up the birth canal, say, oh no, I'm not doing any of this. It's difficult. I just want to go back up.
Nope, not today. I'm not going to show up today.
Problem is, birthing doesn't seem to go that way.
No, not generally.
So we really invite you to ask yourself, listening to us, what is your identity? What makes it up? What pieces do you want to keep? What pieces do you want to give away? And what pieces are coming from the outside world that really don't, maybe somebody who just doesn't know you, who doesn't understand your magnificence. So how can you change it? Because that's the path of the heroine's journey. Thanks for listening with us today. We're delighted to have you on our conversation. We hope you'll come back next week as we explore these questions. Oh my. In the meantime, we say journey onward.
That is this week's episode of The Heroine's Journey. You can access the blog post for this episode along with other great resources at walkthejourney.com. Also, get your free ebook at walkthejourney.com so you can say goodbye to just surviving and turn into thriving. Join us next week for another fun, inspiring, and uplifting episode. If you love this episode, feel free to subscribe and give us a review on iTunes. Stay in touch on other social media platforms, Instagram and our Facebook group, both at The Heroine's Journey LLC. Until next time.